Do humans really stumble this much in the dark, or is it some kind of primitive dance ritual? The Zithron commander's laughter echoed across the metallic hangar as Captain Mara Kellens slammed her knee into another piece of cargo. Around her, alien soldiers with glowing crystalline eyes shimmered like smug lanterns in the void. At least we don't trip over our own egos, she muttered under her breath, clutching her bruised leg while the rest of her squad snickered. Lieutenant Dax, her second-in-command, whispered, "Don't worry, Captain. Once we evolve lighthouses for eyeballs, maybe they'll take us seriously." The Zithrons didn't laugh at that. They didn't need to. Their superiority was woven into their bones, their vision flawless even in the absence of light. The outpost hovered above Vorax 9, a planet so devoid of sunlight that even its shadows seemed dead. To the Zithrons, it was just another mission, a chance to show off their adaptive brilliance. To humans, it was a nightmare. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of something watching. Mara couldn't shake the feeling that darkness here wasn't just the absence of light, it was a presence, breathing just beyond their sight. But there was no room for superstition in the Galactic Peace Force. Orders were simple: investigate the energy anomalies, report findings, and try not to embarrass humanity in front of the glowing overlords. Inside the command bay, the briefing began. Holograms flickered to life, displaying a topographic scan of Vorax 9's surface, though the imagery was static-filled, half-blind even to the system's sensors. Commander Tkor, a Zithron built like a walking prism, glared down at the humans. "This planet emits no natural light and absorbs 90% of artificial wavelengths. A perfect test of endurance." Dax leaned toward Mara, whispering, "Translation: a perfect stage for them to roast us again." She fought a smile. "Let them talk," she said. "They'll still need someone to carry the batteries." As they prepared for descent, Mara's unease grew. The Zithrons wore sleek suits that refracted light into invisible wavelengths, amplifying their night vision. Humans, in contrast, wore bulky helmets equipped with old-fashioned infrared scanners. The Zithrons mocked the gear, calling it torch helmets. The humans pretended not to care, but the sting was real. Every alliance had a hierarchy, and humans knew their place, somewhere between tolerated and expendable. The dropship sliced through the void, engines whispering. Through the cockpit window, Vorax 9 loomed, a black marble swallowing the faint glow of distant stars. No reflection. No contour. Just pure, consuming dark. The Zithrons chattered in their own crystalline language, confident and curious. The humans sat in tense silence, the rhythmic beeping of their scanners the only comfort. Dax broke it first. "Remind me again why we volunteered for this." Mara shot him a look. "Because we're trying to prove we can keep up with the universe's best glow sticks." Landing was rough. The surface of Vorax 9 wasn't solid rock but something halfway between dust and glass. It shifted underfoot like powder, yet every step echoed too loudly. The Zithrons moved ahead, their eyes pulsing with bioluminescent hues, scanning the landscape. Mara and her squad followed, watching the shadows ripple unnaturally. The terrain bent the senses. Sometimes the horizon seemed too close, sometimes infinitely far. Dax muttered, "Feels like the dark's breathing." Mara didn't answer. Hours passed. The Zithrons mocked their slower pace, their limited vision, their constant need for light adjustments. When one of them, Vekar, turned and said, "Your species wouldn't survive a blackout," Mara replied dryly. "We survived 12,000 years without electric eyes. We'll manage." The air between them tightened. Even in darkness, pride could flare bright. Then, without warning, everything went out. Every light, every sensor, every shimmer of Zithron bioglow. One heartbeat, they stood under faint illumination. The next, the universe blinked. Silence. The kind that presses against eardrums until breath itself sounds wrong. Someone cursed in the dark. A Zithron voice trembled. "Recalibrating visual core." Nothing. Total blindness. The Zithrons panicked, stumbling, clawing at their own suits. Dax whispered, "Guess it's not just a human problem now." Mara didn't laugh. Her stomach sank. Something about the dark felt too deliberate, too heavy. She ordered the humans to huddle, relying on infrared memory mapping to retrace steps. The Zitherons refused help at first, pride too sharp to dull even in terror. But as minutes dragged, the hierarchy cracked. The unthinkable had happened. Zitherons, creatures of perfect sight, rendered blind as humans. A few began shouting to one another in confusion. Somewhere in the pitch black, a sound answered back. A scraping, low and slow, like claws on glass. It came closer, then stopped. "Did you hear that?" Dax whispered. Mara nodded, though no one could see. The Zitherons tried to illuminate the area, but every energy pulse fizzled out. A cold hum filled the air, static crawling through the comms. And then it came, the faintest whisper through her earpiece. A single word. "Run." Her heart jolted. The transmission was faint, full of distortion, but unmistakable. "Run." She froze, unsure whether it was her imagination or a distress signal. Then she realized something stranger. Only she had heard it. The others' comms were silent. She replayed it in her helmet, and the sound repeated, identical, looping every 7 seconds. "Run. Run. Run." "Mara, you okay?" Dax's voice was tight. "You look like you saw a ghost." She hesitated. "Did anyone else hear that?" "The comm, did you hear something?" The Zitherons scoffed. "Humans always hear what isn't there. Fear creates echoes." But the fear in their voices betrayed them. The ground trembled. A distant shriek cut through the black, high-pitched and alien, followed by a wet tearing sound. One of the Zitherons screamed. The rest stumbled backward, their bodies colliding like terrified children in a cave. Mara activated her emergency beacon, but nothing came through. The dark ate the signal. Even sound seemed thinner now, as if the air itself was being drained. "Captain," Dax whispered. "Something's picking them off." She forced her breath to steady. "Form up. Stay close. Move slow." The Zitherons' laughter from earlier replayed in her mind, humans stumbling, weak eyes, pitiful night creatures. Now their glowing arrogance had vanished, replaced by desperate breathing. "Run." The word returned, stronger this time, cutting through the static. "Run." She swallowed hard. It wasn't a command. It was a warning. Something in that voice, distant, old, almost human, carried familiarity. It wasn't the tone of a stranger. It was the tone of someone who had been there before. "Move," she whispered. The squad obeyed. No one argued. As they stumbled through endless black, Mara couldn't help but wonder if the mockery had flipped forever. Maybe human eyes weren't weak, they just weren't meant to see what was really out there. And as the word echoed again in her helmet, she realized something even worse. Whoever, or whatever, was sending it, already knew her name. The darkness didn't lift. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost its meaning somewhere between panic and silence. The Zitherons had gone from mocking laughter to shivering murmurs. Their crystalline eyes were dead now, black mirrors reflecting nothing. One of them kept tapping at his armor controls, whispering in disbelief that their vision cores couldn't possibly fail. Mara didn't bother to respond. She was listening to the radio again. The word kept looping through her earpiece, always the same single syllable. "Run." The voice was clearer now, though still broken by static. Human, definitely. Male, possibly. And old. It sounded like it had traveled too far for too long. She didn't know whether to be terrified or comforted. Dax crouched beside her, his helmet light dead but his grin somehow audible in his voice. "So, Captain, are we in the record books yet? First humans to survive a cosmic blackout and get ghosted by radio?" She could almost see his raised eyebrow through the dark. "If you start hearing anything about pizza next, I'm in." She smirked despite herself. Humor was all they had left. "Keep it together, Lieutenant. We still have to find the beacon relay. That's our only way out." His grin faded. "Assuming the beacon isn't already lunch." They moved in slow formation, each step dragging across terrain that shifted like ash. The Zitherons followed reluctantly, Their confidence dissolved into uneasy obedience. Without their superior sight, they had to depend on the humans they had once mocked. Every few meters one would stumble, hissing in frustration. Mara almost felt pity. Almost. The darkness had turned everyone equal, and for once that equality was horrifying. The columns flickered again. Static rolled across the frequency, a white hiss that almost sounded like breathing. Then, beneath the hiss, came another whisper. It wasn't the same voice. This one was softer, higher, and it spoke in fragments. They hear, sight, don't watch. Mara stopped walking. Did anyone else catch that? She asked. Silence followed, except for the faint clicking of Zithron armor joints. Dax said quietly, We didn't hear anything, Captain. You sure it's not feedback? She shook her head. No. It said something. They hear sight. He frowned. What the hell does that even mean? A distant noise interrupted them, a sound like a wet chain dragging through dust. It came from somewhere ahead, and it was getting closer. The Zitherons stiffened, their breathing growing sharp and quick. Tkor, their commander, whispered something in his native tongue, a word that vibrated like broken glass. Then, suddenly, he screamed. His armor sensors flared for a split second, and his massive form vanished into the dark with a crunching sound that made Mara's stomach twist. The sound didn't echo. It was absorbed by the dark, like the planet itself was hungry. The squad broke formation. Dax grabbed Mara's arm, pulling her down behind a ridge of what looked like frozen dust. Sight eaters, he muttered, his voice shaking despite the attempt at control. That's what they have to be. Things that track what looks at them. She felt her pulse slam against her throat. You're saying they hunt through vision? He nodded. If light attracts them, bet it's been feeding time since we landed. The Zitherons tried to restore their bioillumination. One of them succeeded for half a second, and that half second was enough. A faint glow appeared around him, then imploded. The light didn't go out naturally, it was devoured. A snapping sound followed, sharp and final. The glow was gone, and so was the soldier. Dax swore quietly. Well, that confirms it. We're officially the least appetizing thing here. Mara's mind reeled. It made sense. The creatures were attracted to vision, to perception itself. The Zitherons, evolved to see across every spectrum, were essentially neon targets. Humans, limited to a narrow band, were invisible by comparison. Their weakness had become camouflage. She turned to what was left of the Zitheron group. You need to stop trying to see. The more you look, the faster they find you. The survivors stared blankly, unwilling to believe her. Dax added, Yeah, I know it sounds crazy coming from the blind ones, but maybe try being dumb like us for 5 minutes. One Zitheron hissed in fury, but Tkor's second-in-command finally nodded. Desperation had replaced arrogance. They retreated into the remains of an abandoned structure half buried in dust. Inside, the air was colder, thinner. The walls vibrated softly, like they were alive. A faint mechanical hum echoed through the space. Mara approached a control panel by memory, fingers brushing symbols she didn't recognize. Then something blinked. A small green light flickered on her helmet display. The radio signal again. But this time it wasn't looping. A voice came through clearly, rough with distortion but urgent. Human outpost. Vorax 9. Do not use light. Repeat. Do not use light. They consume perception. Do not. The message cut off in static. Dax stared at her. That's Earth code. She nodded slowly. Not just Earth. That's pre-unification frequency. 200 years old. He blinked. How the hell are we getting a signal that old out here? She didn't answer. The thought hit her hard. What if this wasn't a message sent now, but a recording that had never stopped transmitting? A ghost frequency trapped in orbit, repeating forever. Or worse, what if it was sent for this exact moment, by someone who knew they'd be here? They huddled in the dark, the Zitherons murmuring prayers in their own language, a sound like glass grinding. Dax tried to break the tension. You know, I used to think space would be quieter. Turns out it just whispers louder when you're scared. Mara almost smiled. You talk too much, Lieutenant. He shrugged. It's either that or scream. Another voice broke the silence, this time from outside. Not through comms, but in the air itself. It mimicked human speech but wrong, like it was being played backward. Ryuin. The words stretched, warped, and split into laughter. Zitherons flinched. Dax whispered. That's not your radio, right? Mara's throat tightened. No. The sound shifted to a higher pitch, echoing through the walls, a chorus of distorted mockery. Run. 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 Each repetition was closer than the last. Mara grabbed Dax's shoulder. We move now. Quietly. Back to the ship if it's still there. They filed out, guided by the faint pulse of their boots' memory tracers. Every few meters the air seemed to thicken. Shadows moved without form, some brushing past like wind, others heavy enough to make the ground tremble. The Zitherons tried to keep calm, but one broke formation and bolted. There was a flash of light, a single scream, and then nothing. The humans didn't look back. They couldn't afford to. The voice in Mara's ear returned, softer this time. Keep moving. You're close. It wasn't static anymore. It was direct, deliberate, and impossibly personal. Mara. She froze mid-step. Dax turned, sensing the change in her breathing. What is it? She didn't answer. The voice spoke again. Don't let them see you. Her heart raced. Whoever was on that frequency wasn't guessing. They knew exactly what was happening. She forced herself to keep walking. Behind them, something enormous shifted in the dark, dragging claws across stone. The Zitherons whispered a single word in terror that didn't need translation. Predator. The wreckage of the ship creaked like an old throat clearing itself in the dark. Each groan echoed through the metallic ribs of the hull, as if the planet were trying to swallow the remains whole. Mara stood among twisted panels and half-buried consoles, the air dense with dust and static. Dax crouched beside a shattered communication terminal, prying at its circuits with a multi-tool that sparked uselessly. The Zitherons huddled near the wreck's edge, whispering in tones too sharp and crystalline for human ears. They looked smaller now, diminished without their glow, their arrogance burned out like the last embers of a dead fire. One of them trembled visibly, muttering the same phrase over and over. Mara didn't need a translator to understand fear. We can fix the terminal if we can reroute the auxiliary power, Dax said, breaking the silence. His voice was too loud in the heavy dark. That's assuming the cables aren't chewed up like the rest of this junk. Mara nodded, her attention drifting to the shadows beyond the wreckage. Every few moments something shifted there, too soft to see, too loud to ignore. Don't take long, she said quietly. They're still out there. He grunted, not looking up. Yeah, I can feel them breathing down my neck. The radio in Mara's helmet crackled again. It had gone silent for almost an hour, and she'd started to hope it was over. Then the voice returned, faint but clear, as if whispering through a wall of time. They see through what sees them. She froze. The words were broken, fragmented, yet coherent enough to twist her gut. Say again, she whispered. Static replied. Dax looked up, brow furrowed. You getting ghost calls again? She ignored him, staring into the black until she thought she saw movement, a ripple across nothingness, like the dark was folding over itself. One of the Zitherons, the youngest, stepped forward. His name, as close as a human tongue could shape it, was Vorax. Human, he rasped. We saw your recordings from earlier. The frequency you hear, it does not belong here. It echoes from another timeline. Mara blinked. You're saying the message is coming from the future? Vorax's eyes shimmered faintly with residual light. Or from the past. It is all the same for the things that eat perception. Dax snorted softly. Well, that's comforting. I always wanted to die confused. They began moving again, deeper into the wreck to locate the reactor core. The deeper they went, the colder it grew. Frost spread across the walls, forming delicate spirals that pulsed faintly like veins under skin. The Zitherons hesitated. "This is wrong," Vorax whispered. "This ship was not built with coolant systems this cold." Dax tapped one of the frost veins with his glove, and it moved. The ice reacted, curling away like something alive. He recoiled instantly. "That's not frost." Mara shone a dim emergency glow from her wrist lamp, and for a second, the light revealed something that made her stomach twist. The frost wasn't ice. It was the residue of the Sight Eaters. Thin, translucent strands of matter, organic and metallic all at once, threading through the walls like the veins of a parasite. Wherever the light touched, the strands twitched. Mara switched the lamp off immediately. The darkness felt safer than that sight. "They've been feeding off the reactor," she said. "They're feeding on energy, maybe on light itself." Vorax stepped closer to the pulsating strands. "No," he said softly, trembling. "They feed on observation. They absorb anything that looks at them long enough to register form." Mara frowned. "You mean they eat awareness?" He nodded slowly. "You see them. They see you. Then there is no you." For a moment, silence held them all hostage. The implications were too vast, too impossible. Dax finally exhaled. "So they're invisible unless you look at them, and when you do, you die. Fantastic. And these geniuses mocked us for being half-blind." A low rumble shook the floor. Something massive moved outside the hull, dragging across the surface like an avalanche made of muscle. The Zitherons clutched their weapons, though the gesture felt pointless. Vorax's armor began to flicker with involuntary luminescence. Mara saw it immediately. "Turn that off," she hissed. He panicked, slapping at his suit, but the biolight only grew brighter. The glow spread up his chest, pulsing faster. Then everything stopped. The light blinked once and disappeared, taking Vorax with it. The space he had occupied was simply gone. No sound, no trace, no scream. Just erasure. The remaining Zitherons fell to their knees, their voices rising in mournful clicks. Dax whispered. "They didn't even get a chance to blink." Mara's throat felt dry. "That's because blinking wouldn't save them." The ship's systems flickered unexpectedly. A dull hum returned to life, and screens across the wreck glowed weakly. Dax whooped quietly. "We're back on partial power." He turned to Mara. "We can boost the antenna. Maybe reach the orbiting relay." But the moment he activated the uplink, the radio blared again, louder this time. The same voice, calm, human, but impossibly distant. "Do not send light. You will feed them. They listen through photons. Use sound. Use darkness." Then, after a pause that stretched forever, "Mara, this is not the first time. You failed before." Her entire body went still. "What did you say?" she whispered. The voice faded into static, then repeated. "You failed before." Dax looked at her sharply. "Who the hell was that?" She didn't answer. Her mind reeled, flipping through memories she didn't have. The voice had said her name with such familiarity, such certainty, that it hit her like déjà vu twisted into dread. The Zitheron's second in command, a grim creature named Rek, stepped closer. "Our records mention anomalies in time perception around this system. Perhaps the message was an echo of another timeline." Mara met his gaze. "Or a warning from one." They decided to move toward the planet's core. If the Sight Eaters were absorbing energy, the source had to be below. The deeper they went, the more the planet felt wrong. Gravity shifted subtly, sometimes pulling sideways. The air hummed like a heartbeat. Their boots sank into terrain that pulsed faintly underfoot. Eventually they reached a chasm splitting the surface in two. A thin shimmer rose from within it, a ripple of light so faint it looked like a dream trying to remember itself. Dax stared down, awe mixing with terror. "That's got to be the core. Or Hell's reflection." Mara studied it carefully. The shimmer wasn't light exactly, it was information, flickering like broken data. And within it moved shapes, indistinct and humanoid, as though the darkness had tried to remember what life looked like. She realized then what the Sight Eaters truly were. They weren't monsters born of flesh or shadow. They were remnants of perception itself, creatures that lived in the gap between seeing and being seen. Every species that evolved to rely on vision had unknowingly created them, feeding them through every glance cast into the void. Mara turned to Dax. We can't fight them with light or weapons. They exist because we perceive them. The only way to survive is to stop seeing. He blinked. You're telling us to go blind voluntarily? She nodded. It's the only thing that makes us invisible to them. Rek hesitated, then removed the energy core from his armor. There is another way, he said. The Zithron have a fail-safe technology, an adaptive shield that bends perception, turning. The shield activated with a soundless pulse that folded the world around them like a sheet of paper closing on itself. 1 second, Mara stood amid the shattered hull and whispering dark. The next, she was inside a space that didn't exist. It wasn't darkness. It was absence. Sound vanished first, then sensation, then even the faint echo of thought felt muted, as though her brain were whispering through fog. Dax's voice broke through in fragments, muffled and uncertain. Captain, where are we? Did we die? Mara reached out, but her hand passed through a shimmer that wasn't there. We're hidden, she said. The Zithron shield worked. Dax's uneasy laugh cracked through the quiet. Great. We're invisible in a universe that eats light. What could go wrong? The silence stretched. It wasn't peaceful. It pressed against them like a weight, demanding they stay quiet, demanding they forget the concept of sound. But something about the stillness felt wrong. The air inside the shield wasn't truly empty. It moved in slow waves, as if the space was breathing. Every time Mara turned her head, she caught the faintest impression of movement in her peripheral vision, shadows of things that shouldn't exist inside nothing. After what felt like hours, the silence broke with a subtle vibration in her helmet. The radio came alive again, this time faint but steady. The voice was clearer now, low and deliberate. Mara, if you can hear this, don't break the shield. You're safe, but only for a while. They've learned to listen through stillness now. She froze, every instinct tensing. The voice was unmistakably hers. Older, calmer, with a hint of exhaustion woven into every syllable. This is you, the voice continued. And if you're hearing this, the loop hasn't broken yet. Dax blinked. Wait, what loop? Who is that? Mara swallowed hard. Me, she whispered. Or a version of me. Before Dax could reply, a deep tremor shook the shield. The walls of the invisible space rippled, flashes of distorted color flickering through. Outside, something scraped against the barrier, testing it. The Zithron technology wasn't meant to hold this long. Dax pressed his helmet to the ground, straining to hear. They're everywhere. The whole planet's crawling with them. Mara tightened her grip on the core stabilizer. Then we move before they learn how to see us anyway. They pushed forward through the hollow space until they found themselves back near the outpost base, or what remained of it. The metal structures were twisted like melted sculptures, glistening faintly with the residue of the Sight Eaters. The ceiling wasn't a ceiling anymore. It moved, subtly undulating like muscle tissue. Dax pointed upward. Tell me that's not alive. Mara didn't answer. The ceiling exhaled, and fine dust rained down. Every instinct screamed that they shouldn't look up. She remembered the radio warning from before. Don't look up. She turned sharply away, forcing her gaze to the floor. Keep your eyes down, she said. If we look, they'll know where we are. Dax hesitated. You're saying the ceiling is watching us? Mara didn't have time to explain. The radio crackled again, and her own voice repeated the same command. Don't look up. The timing wasn't random. It was a warning replaying itself, like an echo trying to alter its own past. They moved deeper into the ruins, careful not to make sound. The floor vibrated with each step, resonating like a drum. It was almost musical, a low hum that reminded Mara of a heartbeat. Then, from the dark ahead, a faint glow appeared, a single surviving Zithron, armor cracked, crawling toward them. His once luminous eyes flickered weakly. Dax raised his weapon instinctively, but Mara stopped him. The alien wasn't attacking. He was trying to speak. You hid, he rasped. They smell the unseen now. His chest convulsed, the glow dying in waves. They are learning perception itself. Then his body crumbled into a fine powder, absorbed by the air. Dax muttered, "Well, there goes our rescue team." Mara knelt by the remains. Beneath the dust, she found a small device, a data prism glowing faintly with residual energy. She pocketed it. "We'll decode it later," she said. Dax shook his head. "Later? You keep saying that like we're not minutes from being cosmic appetizers." She looked at him, calm but weary. "Because if we don't find out what caused this, it'll happen again. Somewhere else. Maybe everywhere." They reached the control chamber. The walls were alive with faint movement, like veins pulsing beneath glass. The shield flickered again, growing weaker. Dax checked the power readings. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before this thing folds." Mara connected the data prism to her suit's interface. The alien technology struggled to translate, symbols flashing like shifting constellations. Then, finally, words formed on the screen. "Project Vorax, Temporal Breach Containment. The anomaly feeds on quantum observation. Each investigation creates recursive time feedback, attracting entities of perception. Recommended, terminate observation chain immediately." Mara exhaled slowly. "They caused it themselves," she murmured. "The Zitherons opened a temporal fold that made the Sight Eaters real. They fed on being watched until they became self-sustaining." Dax frowned. "You're saying these things didn't exist until someone saw them into existence?" She nodded. "Exactly. Every mission, every team that came here to study the dark, kept feeding them. We're part of the same loop." The ceiling shifted again, slower this time, deliberate. Something massive was moving above them. The sound was almost gentle, like the creak of wood on a ship. Then came a whisper, deep and resonant, echoing from everywhere at once. "We see you." The voice wasn't human or alien. It was made of every voice that had ever looked into the dark. The shield flickered violently. Dax cursed, grabbing the stabilizer. "It's collapsing!" The radio erupted into noise again. Future Mara's voice screamed through static. "Get to the relay core! Destroy the link before they bridge the timelines!" Then, softer, almost sorrowful. "Don't make my mistake!" They ran. The hallway bent around them, turning in impossible directions. Sometimes it led forward, sometimes back into itself. The world folded like origami around a single point. Mara led the way by instinct, following the faint pulse of the relay's signal. Dax stumbled behind, panting, muttering jokes to stay sane. "I'm just saying, Captain, next time we join an alliance, can we pick one without reality-eating monsters?" They burst into the relay chamber, a towering cylinder of light that shimmered like frozen lightning. The shield finally gave out, vanishing with a pop that left the air raw. Immediately, the darkness stirred. Shapes slithered along the walls, stretching into twisted silhouettes. Mara pulled the energy core from her pack. "If we destroy the relay, the loop collapses." Dax stared at her. "And us with it?" She hesitated. "Maybe. But it'll stop them from spreading." Before she could act, one of the shadows detached itself from the wall. It stood upright, vaguely human, its face a perfect reflection of hers. The same eyes, the same scar under the left cheek. It smiled faintly. "You can't win by running," it said in her voice. "You never do." Mara stepped back, shaking her head. "You're not me." The shadow tilted its head. "Not yet." The silence after the blast was wrong. It wasn't the kind that came after noise, but the kind that existed before it, ancient and patient. The light from the relay had burned itself into Mara's retinas, leaving shapes that pulsed behind her eyelids like afterimages of gods. Dax was on the floor beside her, coughing, blinking as if trying to make sure reality had settled back into one piece. "Captain," he rasped, "if you're planning to tell me that worked, I'd really appreciate it now before I start screaming." Mara didn't answer. She was too busy listening. The whispers were gone, The endless rustle of voices that had filled the dark now replaced by a soft hum, rhythmic and steady. It sounded like breathing, but not human. It was the planet itself exhaling. They staggered to their feet, surrounded by the wreckage of the relay chamber. The air shimmered faintly, fractured light hanging like mist. The walls had melted into smooth black glass, reflecting their movements in distorted fragments. Dax looked around, wiping blood from his cheek. "We're alive. Somehow. Either that or we're ghosts pretending." Mara moved toward the relay core's remains. The structure still pulsed weakly, leaking blue light that dimmed and brightened like a dying heartbeat. She placed a gloved hand on it, and the pulse synced with hers for a moment before fading. The voice in her helmet returned, faint, broken, but still hers. "Not yet. The loop bends but does not break." She clenched her jaw. "You again," she murmured. "What are you? A recording? A hallucination?" The voice replied softly. "A consequence." Dax frowned. "Captain, you're talking to yourself again, which I'd say is a bad sign even by interstellar standards." She ignored him. "If this isn't over, then tell me what stops it. What do they want?" The voice sighed, a sound that carried centuries of exhaustion. "They want to be remembered. Every time we erase them, we create the memory again. The moment someone looks into the dark, the cycle restarts." Mara's stomach tightened. "So destroying the relay wasn't enough?" The voice answered. "No. It was never about the relay. It's about you." Then the signal cut. The chamber dimmed completely, the faint pulse of light finally going out. Dax exhaled slowly. "Well, that's comforting. Turns out the apocalypse is personal." They left the chamber, stepping into what was once the outer corridor of the base. The walls were torn apart, exposing the barren surface of Vorax 9. The atmosphere shimmered faintly, like the planet itself was beginning to crack. The sky, or what passed for it, shifted colors, dark to darker, with hints of something deeper beneath. Dax squinted at the horizon. "That's not normal, right? Because if that's sunrise, I quit." Mara followed his gaze. The horizon wasn't glowing. It was bending, folding inward like a wound closing. The sight made her dizzy. They climbed over debris until they reached the remains of the communications tower. It was partially intact, its antennas twisted toward the sky like frozen lightning. Dax rummaged through the control panel, tapping it experimentally. "We can send a pulse to the fleet. Maybe warn them not to come." Mara shook her head. "If the signal goes out, the Sight Eaters could follow it. They exist through observation. Broadcasting anything could start it all again." He sighed. "So, our options are dying quietly or dying loudly." "Fantastic." Something shifted nearby. The sound was soft but deliberate, like footsteps dragging through sand. Dax raised his weapon, though it trembled slightly in his grip. Out of the dark stepped a figure. It moved slowly, unsteady but unmistakably humanoid. As it drew closer, Mara's breath caught. It was her. The same face, same eyes, same uniform, only older. The lines on her face looked carved from exhaustion, her eyes hollow but aware. Dax swore under his breath. "Okay, I take it back. This planet officially wins the Creepiest in the Galaxy award." The other Mara stopped a few meters away, studying her younger self. When she spoke, her voice carried that same weary tone from the radio. "You didn't finish it. You delayed it, but you didn't end it." Mara stared back, half defiant, half terrified. "Then tell me how. Tell me what I missed." The older version hesitated. "You can't destroy something that lives inside perception. You can only remove the perceivers. Every time we survive, the memory continues. Every retelling creates another cycle. You have to cut it off entirely." Dax stepped between them, eyes darting between both women. "Wait a second. Are you saying we have to erase ourselves?" The older Mara nodded slowly. "Yes. Humanity's awareness of the event sustains them. The Zitherons created them, but we kept them alive by trying to understand. The only way out is silence, no witnesses, no memory. The younger Mara's chest ached. You want me to sacrifice everyone? Erase our species' memory? Her counterpart met her gaze. Or let them consume every world that ever learns to see. The ground trembled violently, interrupting them. The planet's surface cracked in spirals, lines of dull red light spilling upward like veins bursting open. Dax grabbed the railing for balance. Discussion's great and all, but I think the planet just voted for extinction anyway. Mara turned back to her older self. If I do this, if I wipe everything, how do I make sure the message doesn't repeat? The older Mara stepped closer. You can't stop a signal once it's sent. But you can override it. Replace it with something harmless, something that ends the transmission chain. The realization hit her like a blow. The word. The first signal. Run. It had always been the trigger, the loop's restart point. She could replace it with another signal, one that ended the sequence instead of starting it. I can send a counter frequency, she said. A human signal that breaks observation instead of spreading it. The older Mara nodded slowly, faint approval in her eyes. Then this time, maybe we end it. She stepped back, fading like a reflection in a mirror losing its light. Remember, don't look up when it starts. Then she was gone. Dax stared at Mara speechless. You just had a full conversation with your future self about erasing reality. I'm gonna need therapy if we live. She gave a small, strained smile. You can bill me later. They worked quickly. Dax rerouted the tower's core energy to power a short-range burst. Mara programmed the transmission manually, her fingers moving through the code like a ritual. The message was simple, stripped of any meaning that could draw attention. A single word repeated once. Stop. The signal would spread silently through subspace, absorbing and nullifying the original frequency. When it finished, there would be no more echoes. No more loops. The planet's tremors intensified. Cracks opened beneath their feet, glowing like veins of molten thought. The air itself seemed to tear. Dax shouted over the noise. You sure this won't vaporize us? She looked up, watching the ceiling of the world split into a storm of void and light. It will. That's the point. She activated The light was gone, but Mara was not. When she opened her eyes, she saw nothing yet knew she was seeing. The absence had texture, like velvet drawn over the mind. Her body floated weightless, unanchored, but the sense of falling never came. For a long while, she thought this was death. Then she heard a sound, steady, mechanical, familiar. It was the hum of a medical scanner. The world began to rebuild itself in fragments. White light seeped in, soft and sterile. Voices murmured. A shape leaned over her, blurred but human. She's awake, someone said. The words sounded unreal, like echoes from a dream. She blinked, and reality assembled itself around her piece by piece. She was lying in an infirmary. Clean metal walls. Blue lighting. The insignia of the Galactic Peace Force on the ceiling. But something was off. The design was older, more minimal, as if a century had passed since she had last seen it. A man stood beside her bed, tall, silver-haired, wearing a uniform she didn't recognize. Captain Mara Kellen, he said, his voice polite but distant. Welcome back. You've been in cryostasis for a very long time. She tried to speak, but her throat felt raw. How long? The man glanced at a digital tablet. 212 years. Her pulse quickened. That wasn't possible. The last thing she remembered was the explosion on Vorax 9, the moment everything vanished. What happened to the mission? She asked. To Dax? The man hesitated. Your mission is classified under temporal containment protocols. As for Lieutenant Dax, I'm sorry. His body was never recovered. She closed her eyes, fighting the wave of emotion that rose in her chest. So we failed, she whispered. He looked at her curiously. Failed? Captain, your actions saved the Alliance. The Vorax incident ended the Temporal Cascade War. You're listed as one of humanity's greatest tacticians. The words didn't comfort her. They felt hollow, like someone else's story. She sat up slowly, ignoring the protests of her muscles. Through the window she could see Earth, not as she remembered it but brighter, cleaner, ringed by orbital cities. Ships moved in perfect patterns, glowing trails across the void. "Where are the Zitherons?" she asked quietly. The man paused again. "Extinct," he said finally. "Their empire collapsed after the anomaly. They never recovered. Humanity rebuilt faster." She stared at the view, mind reeling. The Zitherons, those arrogant beings who mocked human sight, who saw everything and learned nothing, gone. It should have felt like victory, but all she could think about was their terrified faces in the dark, stripped of their pride. She thought of Vorax and Rek, of their final words. They had been wrong about strength. In the end, it wasn't superior vision that survived, it was blindness, the ability to endure without seeing. The officer handed her a small data crystal. "You might want to see this," he said. "Recovered from the ruins of your outposts before the system was sealed." He left the room, leaving her alone with the faint hum of machinery. Mara inserted the crystal into the wall terminal. The screen flickered, revealing fragmented video logs. Her younger self appeared, speaking into a helmet recorder, explaining the situation, the creatures, the loop. The sound was distorted, half lost to time. But then came the radio clip. The word she'd sent before the explosion. "Stop." It repeated, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The sight of it hit her harder than any memory. That single word had ended everything. No more loops. No more sight eaters. But the cost was time itself. She had been frozen between moments, forgotten until history needed a symbol. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent her life fighting creatures born of perception, only to become a myth created by the same flaw. Footsteps approached. A young woman entered, her eyes wide with reverence. "Captain Kellen," she said, almost breathless. "It's an honor. I'm part of the new Interstellar Vision Research team." Mara tensed. "Vision Research?" The woman smiled. "Yes, we've been analyzing the remains of Vorax 9. The readings show fascinating anomalies in quantum observation. We believe it can help us." Mara interrupted sharply. "Stop." The word came out louder than she intended. The woman froze. Mara's heart pounded. "Don't study it," she said. "Don't look at it. Some things should stay unseen." The young researcher hesitated, clearly confused. "But Captain, your discovery wasn't a discovery," Mara snapped. "It was a warning." The woman nodded uncertainly and left, glancing back once before the door closed behind her. Mara exhaled shakily, staring at her reflection in the screen. The shadows under her eyes looked deeper than time itself. Later, she was transferred to a debriefing center in orbit. The halls were sleek, filled with quiet technicians and curious officers who watched her like she was a relic. Every corridor echoed faintly, reminding her too much of Vorax 9. She couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered in the silence. One night, while reviewing historical archives, she came across an anomaly report from a deep space probe. It described faint radio signals emanating from the edge of known space. A repeating pattern. One word. Run. Her blood turned cold. She played the file again, hoping she'd imagined it, but the word repeated, perfectly preserved, identical to the one that had started everything centuries ago. She stared at the report's coordinates. It wasn't Vorax 9. The signal was coming from a different system altogether. The loop hadn't died, it had moved. She requested an emergency audience with the Galactic Council. They denied her. Too much time had passed, they said. The signal was probably a coincidence. She knew better. The universe didn't deal in coincidence, it dealt in repetition. So she stole a ship? It wasn't difficult. Being a legend had its advantages. She left orbit under cover of a scheduled transport mission, setting her course toward the coordinates of the new signal. The journey took weeks. She spent most of it in silence, listening to the faint hum of the engines and the quiet repetition of that cursed word. Run. It never sounded threatening anymore. It sounded like a heartbeat, like something waiting to be understood. When she finally reached the source, she expected another dead world, another trap. Instead, she found a derelict station floating above a barren moon. Its lights were out, its hull scarred by centuries of neglect. She docked carefully and stepped inside. The air was stale but breathable. Every corridor was lined with human markings, old insignias, outdated tech. It wasn't Zitharon. It was Earth-built. She made her way to the control room, guided by the faint pulse of the signal. The console was cracked, but one screen still worked. The message was broadcasting automatically, looping endlessly. Run. She stared at it for a long time before shutting the transmitter down. The hum stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. She turned to leave, but something caught her attention in the reflection of the screen. A shadow, faint but familiar, moved behind her. She spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. Then the radio on her suit crackled softly. "You did it," a voice said. Her own voice, calm.